the adjuvant, which is another ingredient in a vaccine, particularly whatever they use in the flu vaccine. I'm not sure what it is offhand, but it causes a lot of health problems in people. So it's not even the chemical for the vaccine, it's these other ingredients that are causing a lot of the trouble. There was
mercury, etc.
Yeah, mercury is in that thimerosal, which is that preservative. Now, a lot of the newer vaccines are actually thimerosal-free. So the mercury isn't so much a matter anymore, but other things, like that adjuvant I mentioned, and that's a chemical that's put in a vaccine for a very specific reason, and it's in almost all vaccines, and that's causing a lot of trouble. That's, there can be vaccine injuries from something as simple as they hit a nerve when they vaccinated you. That's not very common, but it can happen. And you're no longer, the federal government enabled a law in, I believe it was the 80s, something to that effect, that you can't actually sue the vaccine company anymore. Now, there are federal vaccine injured cases, and that's how people are getting some of this money, but you can't go directly, go sue Merck at all because you were injured from one of their vaccines. It's just not allowed.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, be very careful and do your research.
Do your due diligence. Find impartial information, not propaganda, and there's a lot of it out there on both sides. Don't get me wrong. There's just as much inaccurate information on natural health care on the internet as there is about regular health care. I mean, and that is why, my business Facebook page, Marshfield Acupuncture, is where I post a lot of research, and some of it's on both sides. And it's research that has been in peer-reviewed journals, or at least is citing work from peer-reviewed journals. Not all of it's 100%. Some of it's a little less strict than that. I'm not an editor, so I'm not going to go through everything that crazy, but I read the stuff. I look at their citations. And, I'm just about keeping people informed. I don't post strictly anti-vaccine stuff on that Facebook page for Marshfield Acupuncture. I post the education information, and I state right in there, just be informed. When you get a medical treatment, there's something called an informed consent that you have your patient sign. With acupuncture, we're required to list the possible side effects, such as bruising, such as something called needle sickness, which is a vasovagal response, or in simple terms, passing out can happen. Usually if you have very low blood sugar, or if you're very fatigued, or if you're very old and very weak, and the treatment is particularly aggressive. But we list those side effects in that informed consent so you can make an informed consent. They give that paperwork to you, or at least some of it, when you do your vaccines for you and your kids and everyone else. Nobody reads it. They just look at it and sign it. Why? It's a lot of information in very small print.
Yeah. And those of us who need glasses, it's really small. And we tend to hurry nowadays, too.
Yeah.
And
I'm not talking, if you really want to know about a vaccine, get the actual package insert. I'm not talking about the sheets your pharmacist hands you. That's a very small edited version. You look at if you unfold the vaccine insert for the influenza vaccine, it's almost as tall as I am on both sides in something like a type 8 pitch font.
Oh, wow.
I'm 6 foot tall, folks. This is radio. You can't see that, but trust me, I'm that tall. And that's, again, it's in very small print. I'm 47. I can't read that stuff without my reading glasses.
Yep, and that's the way they want it. My husband has...
You know what? Who's going to read all that? Who does?
Well, right.
Some of us natural health care practitioners read it. We've read, or at least read it in greater detail than just the sheets you're handed by the pharmacist. That's how you've heard me cite a whole bunch of stuff just off the top of my head so far. One, I have a really, really good memory. And I say it sometimes I might be partially wrong. I didn't make notes for this speech. I never make notes. Unless I'm doing something at a college, when, of course, I have to cite actual things. And then I will do that. But I know a lot of this information because I've read a lot of this stuff, and I have a really good memory and can recall a lot of it. Not a lot of people are blessed with either one of those, and want to take the time to read that 6-foot-tall, double-sided, pitch 8, headache-making insert.
Yeah.
If you can get your hands on it.
Yeah. Just you mentioning it, just, yikes. And how many of us read the insert even from the pharmacist?
Right. And they give you those 8x10 sheets that are printed off of their printer, which is a very edited version. But people don't read those either. But those are obviously pro-vaccine. That's why you're getting them.
Yeah.
So I have some of the side effects on there because it's a federal law. But it won't have everything, not by any means.
Well, hello, Doctor. This is Bob. I'm Sandy's husband. And once again, thank you so much for coming on our show today. And just for all our listeners out there, could you, you are just an encyclopedia of information and knowledge. Could you tell everybody how to contact you, where you work at, and if anybody wants to make appointments, how they would go about doing that?
Yes, I'd be more than happy to. As she said, I do have an NCAAOM, that's our national board, diplomat website. The easiest way to find me is on Facebook, Marshfield Acupuncture. I have a professional Facebook page for that. There's a contact me button on it. I don't always get back to them super quickly because I'm with patients. You can call my office number, which is my cell phone, 715-323-0548. You can go to the website. There's a button on there to request an appointment. That button will only give you the appointments that it can most easily drop you into. The complicated scheduling, I lock that out because I don't want anyone to mess it up. For example, almost always with a new patient, that first 1-hour visit, I try and never overlap. I have 2 treatment rooms, and when I'm treating regular patients, I overlap all the time. But when it's you coming in for your first visit, I want you to have my full attention while you're here. So unless you need a weird time or we just can't make it work, that full hour is yours.
Since this is worldwide, you're in Marshfield, Wisconsin in the United States, correct?
That is correct. Marshfield, Wisconsin, in the central of the state in the United States. And the address is listed on the Facebook page, on the website. I'm downtown in our little town here at 243 Central Avenue. I do have patients just stop in once in a while because they see the sign out front and they're curious, and you're welcome to do that. I might not be able to talk at the time if I'm busy with patients, but I try to. At least I will definitely say hello and call me this time or stop back in here. I've got a little break. I'm more than happy to talk with people about this. I love what I do. It comes across in what I say. Obviously, I care a lot about what I do. I'm in this to help people in any way. And even if that's referring you out to another physician because I think they're more appropriate, yes, I do that all the time. Or I don't always refuse the treat and refer out, but very commonly I'll say, listen, you've got to do this as well. I had a patient recently, without giving you their name, their symptoms were consistent, they're older, and I said, you know what, this might not be gout. There's a chance based on your symptoms it could be diabetes starting in. Please go get tested by your primary physician. It's for your best interest. You don't necessarily have to take the meds they recommend. That's up to you, but you need to know what's going on because you can lose toes and such if you don't know what you're doing with that stuff.
Well, thank you, Doctor. May I call you Dr. John? Your last name is...
Yep. I go by Dr. John. I go by John. When my patients see me out at Festival Foods here in town, please, just call me John. And I say that all the time. If you're in my office, Dr. John's appropriate. On this radio show, Dr. John's appropriate because it's a professional environment. But, yeah, that's what I go by because Schneindl, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Could you spell your last name for people that want to look you up?
Yep. It is S as in Sam, C as in Charlie, H as in Hot, R as in Ralph, E as in Edward, I as in Indigo, N as in Nancy, D as in David, L as in Larry.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. John. And
thank you.
I have a little bit of different background than Sandy has, and I'd like to tell you I first found out about Chinese medicine. Well, actually, I have an interesting history. Back in the somewhere around 15 or 20 years ago, I came across a bunch of books that were written by a doctor from Tibet. His name was Lobsang Rampa. Maybe you've heard of him.
I have.
You have? And for
I have. I actually.
The audience,
oops, go ahead.
Yeah, for any of the listeners that never heard of him, he wrote a series of books about him. He was in Tibet, and he never said what his age was, but I imagine he was born in the early part of the 1900s, and he was raised in what was called the Shakpuri Lamasery in Tibet. And what that was known for, it was the Tibet's primary medical lamasery, where they had over like 5,000 kids in the program training to become medical doctors. And what I thought was really interesting, one of the things that really struck me was he always claimed that their medicine was over 5,000 years old, and it was just in a different class than Western medicine. And one of the things I thought was interesting is they were really big into treatment with herbs, as you are. Mm-hmm. It's the way to go. And he said that some herbs were very hard to find, and he said every year they take about 20 or 30 volunteers, and they would actually climb up on the highest peaks of the Himalayan mountains searching for these mountain flowers that contain herbs that they use in their medical practice. So
that's very true.
So is that an area of interest for you? I find it quite fascinating myself. What is your experience with Dr. Rampa, Lobsang Rampa, and tell me what you think about him.
Well, I got more introduced to him through Tibetan Buddhism, and which I was interested in quite a while, and then I actually changed to Buddhism in Thailand, which is a different sect of Buddhism. It's a little older, and just done a little differently. But they're all part of that Buddhist practice. But yeah, some of these herbs, sometimes people wonder why these decoctions, the teas, when you go get them, can be so expensive. Well, this thing grows on the shady side of a mountain facing northeast and can only be harvested between the weeks of X, Y, and Z. And that's exactly true. You can go get that plant at other times, and if you do, the properties aren't the same or what you need. For example, they tried to collectively grow these things in the United States, a lot of them, in an herbal farm, so to speak. The soil's different. The sun's different. The air is different. The water's different. The same thing that can make two different pieces of corn from two different farmers taste different makes these herbs different. And so the efficacy of the herbs can change. What they treat changes. And they've been studying them for 5,000 years, the way they grow there. Western medicine has only been around, pharmaceutical medicine has only been around since the 1900s. Western herbal medicine has been around much longer. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just different and not nearly as complex. The Chinese pharmacopoeia for herbs is insanely huge. Just the most common herbs is about the size of an Oxford dictionary. That's the common ones. That's not the uncommon weird ones. The Chinese formulary index is the same size. These are huge pieces of information. Even as a very well-qualified Chinese doctor, I could never know it all. There's too much information. I'm pretty smart. I'm not that smart.
Well, one of my wake-up calls, as I became more aware of medicine, was from some books written by a doctor in the Detroit area. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name now. I should probably take some of your medicine for Alzheimer's and memory lapse.
Well, we use ginkgo in Chinese medicine.
but anyway, there was a medical doctor over there, and I think one of the books he wrote, just so you know who I'm talking about, was Salt Your Way to Health was one of the books he wrote. Well, anyway,
I think I've heard of that one.
Okay, well, one of the very, very interesting things that he wrote in one of his books was the comment about the companies that make vaccines, like Baxter and all these different companies, and he said that what these companies do is, they're not coming up with all these drugs and medicines, just out of the cold blue. What they're doing is they are taking the Chinese herbs, and they know what the Chinese herbs do. And so what they're doing is they're taking these Chinese herbs and taking these herbs into their laboratories and putting them under a microscope and doing all these chemical tests. And what they're trying to do is synthesize these herbs into chemical formulas. And that's what these drug companies do. And I thought it was very interesting. He said life forms like the human body and animals and everything have receptors in their body so that when you take an herbal medicine, these receptors accept these medicines and they fit in just perfectly like a jigsaw puzzle. And when your body no longer needs that herb, it'll kick it free and as you become healed by those herbs that you're taking, these herbal medicines. But on the other hand, he said when these companies are manufacturing these chemicals, they have one thing working against them is they have to patent their medicine. I mean, it's kind of a dog-eat-dog pony show where they're in a lot of competition. So when they synthesize one of these medicinal herbs, they have to alter it by adding an extra couple molecules or molecule chains in order to get it patented by the governments and the overseeing agencies of the medical industry. And so the problem with that is when they take a natural herb and add an extra few molecules onto it, what happens is those chemicals do not fit in the receptors in your body like they're supposed to. It's kind of like a kid's toy where he has the squares and the circles and the triangles and the star shapes, and he tries to put a square into a triangular hole. It doesn't work. Or if he can cram it in, it's going to be almost impossible to get it out again. Well, this doctor was saying that's what causes side effects when you take all these chemical medications, because your receptors aren't working properly and they don't release them naturally into your body, and that's where all these side effects come from. So would you like to comment on that idea?
Sure. This can get really long and complex. A lot of what you said is very, very true. I'm going to add one more specific, though. For instance, statin medications for cholesterol. We all know, and they're getting pushed like crazy. Statins were derived out of the active ingredient in a Chinese herb with the English name of red yeast rice, which is a type of rice that has actually been fermented by a certain type of yeast, which creates red rice. That naturally occurring herb has not just statins in it. It's got hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands and 20 of thousands little chemicals in it. Some we don't know, and most we don't know how they interact. So when you take the herb, it's much safer. There's not been a case of liver shutting down from red yeast rice, unless it was adulterated with some kind of chemical.